Frequently referred to as something of a state religion, the NHS can also be seen as a spoilt child. What it wants, it gets. But the public cry, hurrah! But might the record levels of funding finally be facing a challenge? The Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak no less, says that the NHS must show signs of improvement before it gets more goodies. Its latest budget is £175 billion for a year. And now the Chancellor wants to see improved results, which means a cut in waiting lists and waiting times. But while some point to years of Tory austerity and underfunding causing the NHS's ill health, others say it is the structural inefficiency within the service which costs so much money. So it poses the question, are our public services underfunded or are they undermanaged and even poorly structured? I'm delighted to be joined now by Nigel Edwards, who's Chief Executive at the Nuffield Trust, a think tank specialising in health matters. Really good of you to join us this evening. The NHS has had more restructures and reorganisations than you can shake a stick at, but seldom, if ever, is it asked to prove value for money. Do you sense that's about to stop?
I sense that's not at all true, actually. The NHS has been subject to very substantial efficiency savings since Mrs Thatcher at a rate of 2 to 3% a year. So a bit of a historical perspective would help us here. I do sense a change in the mood. I suppose one thing I would say is that actually one of the problems the NHS has about productivity is that a massive underinvestment, largely the fault of the Treasury, which has left us with fewer diagnostic equipment, fewer pieces of diagnostic equipment, fewer hospital beds, fewer doctors than almost all of our Western European neighbours. And you know, there's a sort of mistake in the Treasury's mindset between efficiency and cheapness. And unfortunately, what we've got is something that is cheap and could be a lot more efficient. But paradoxically, to be more efficient, it would actually need more technology, more equipment. So it's a huge underinvestment. And that is at the door of the Treasury not just through the Conservative administration, but frankly, for the last 40 to 50 years. And probably also explains why our railways don't work and our roads have all got holes in them.
Let me take you back to the perfectly reasonable criticism you made of my introduction. I accept that there have been savings demanded here and there that often have been completely nonsensical, closures of wards and getting rid of staff. What I'm talking about is when the NHS says we need £5 billion to do X, seldom does that £5 billion come with a contract, as it would in the commercial sector, saying, yes, if you cure X number of people, save Y number of lives and do Z number of operations.
Again, that really this may be the impression that's been created, but actually, again, taking along the historical perspective of that during the Blair years with Michael Barber, for early parts of the coalition government, that again would not be true. In fact, the problem again is back to a short-termist approach to how this is managed, and a concentration, and you rightly point out, on penny-wise, pound-foolish efficiency savings rather than really strategically thinking about how services need to change, and in particular a neglect of the workforce. It's very hard to get efficiency and real change if you haven't got the workforce on side. And I'm afraid there's severe signs that we've lost connection over the years with a substantial number of the people that we need to make change happen.
Incidentally, I saw your excellent exchange with Isabel Hardman on workforce and training earlier on, which I thoroughly recommend to anybody, which is there and available on Twitter. I think there's enough common ground between us for me to ask the next question, moving it on slightly. In your view and given your experience, is the NHS simply politically too powerful, or is it badly managed, badly led?
There's a whole set of really interesting questions in there. personally think that the very close association of politicians with the day-to-day management of hospitals and healthcare, which is not something you see in most other developed countries, it has a pernicious and undermining effect on its effectiveness. I've referred to one of those problems, which is the dominance that it's given the Treasury. It also means that the jobs of leading it may be actually quite unattractive, particularly to clinicians. When you find more clinicians managing hospitals and other healthcare providers in other countries. I have to say, the evidence that it's poorly managed is not very strong. There's some very good top leaders, but unfortunately, they are forced to spend an awful lot of their time looking upwards for the lead of politicians. Again, something we don't see in other countries. So I'm afraid that we may have a slight lions led by donkeys problem. I'm not claiming NHS managers are lions and politicians are donkeys, but I'm not entirely sure the politicians really create an environment in which really good people can change and manage their services because of the insistent short-term nature of our political cycle, the short-termist nature of the way that the Treasury manage the money, and the tendency to respond very quickly, almost to knee-jerk issues, rather than what we would find in other European countries where people seem to take a more strategic view about how services are managed, and the politicians get much less involved in the operational details in the way that I think many people would welcome in this country.